Hello and welcome to the Gonzales Mitchell Show. I'm Clay Mitchell.
And I'm Patrick Gonzales.
And today, Patrick and I are going to talk about the long anticipated release of the statewide Gonzales poll, which will be released in parts this week. Today, we talk about the first part of that poll, which has to do with the presidential election. We're going to examine and talk about Joe Biden's approval ratings, Kamala Harris's approval ratings, Donald Trump's approval ratings, and we'll find out from the grand pollster himself if the election were held today, who would win in Maryland. With that,
The
Patrick.
Grand Pollster, the Grand Pollster, who else is joining us today?
Oh, I don't know. I meant you, sir. I meant you,
Oh,
sir.
well, thank you. I ain't never been called Grand before. Thank you very much.
What's happening?
Oh, let me tell you something, Clay. We have some really groovy results in part one of our statewide poll. So let me begin we'll cut right to the chase and get to the horse race. If the election were today, 56% of Marylanders would vote for Vice President Kamala Harris and her running mate Tim Walz. 35% would vote for former President Donald Trump and his running mate J.D. Vance. And what does that leave undecided? 6 and 5. That leaves about 9% undecided.
9%. Right.
So, yeah, and it cuts a long party. I mean, Trump's getting 80% of the Dems. Harris is getting over 80% of the Republicans. Now, one of the interesting findings in this poll is that Vice President Harris is up among independents, but only by 2 points, 38-36. So Maryland's not in danger. But when I saw that extrapolating to the rest of the country, to the extent you can, and I'm always cautious about doing that, a 2-point lead among Maryland independents is not the kind of number I'd want to see in a state that was, along with Massachusetts and Vermont, the Democrats' best state in 2020.
Patrick, I'm looking at this. I note that in the sample of African American voters, 11% were for Trump Vance. Is that up from years past, down from years past, or the same?
Well, it's certainly not in the realm of the 20% plus number you see bandied about frequently in the national media and stuff. I've never done a poll in Maryland where I looked at the black vote for Trump and said, oh my God, this is amazing. Now, what I do detect and what I see within the number is there is a sharp chasm between African American women and African American men. To the extent Donald Trump's going to make inroads into the black community, and I think he will across the country when all is said and done, it's going to be done mostly with African American men.
I see that women 60% for Harris Walz and 38% of men for Trump Vance, which I think goes along with your theory with that he may be making some inroads with African American men, uh, which we've heard bannered about in the media the past 2-3 months.
Well, the thing we got to keep in mind, Clay,
Yeah,
let me touch on that real quick. The thing we got to keep in mind is that not only in Maryland, but generally, a Democratic electorate is comprised of roughly 57 to 58, 59% female. And that is not only in Maryland, that's across the board. Now, within the African American community, Black Democrats are over 60% female. So Republican are about 50%, 51, 52% male. So when you see these gender differences, yes, they are absolutely real, but they're also driven by the composition of the two parties. So anyway.
we go to look at President Biden's job approval numbers. What thoughts do you have on that? I see 53% approve, 45% disapprove of President Biden's performance.
I don't see a whole lot of difference between what we found in February. It's about the same, which I guess is not, I don't know, surprising or not. Now, what we did see with Vice President Harris's approval numbers as vice president was a substantial bounce for her. In February, she had a very problematic 46 approve, 47 disapprove in Maryland. Now, since then, a lot of things have happened. That's an understatement. She no longer is simply the vice president. She is now the Democratic standard bearer for the November election. Her numbers today stand at 55% approve, 37% disapprove. That's pretty good. She's now up plus 18. That's a 19-point switch since February, and that's a good sign. But what's kind of surprised me a little, and another cautionary sign to my eye when I see the matchup, is her 56-35 lead, 21 point, is the exact same margin Joe Biden had in February when he was leading Trump 53-21. So there was certainly a bounce for the vice president out of the Chicago convention and since, but it's all come from within the base. It has not translated yet in Maryland to the independent vote at all. So we will see what transpires over the next 9 weeks.
So what you're saying, you think that Kamala Harris is now similarly situated to where Biden was 6 months ago. It's basically
yes, yeah. In a broad sense, in a broad sense, yes. That's yes.
Now we move over to former President Trump. You had let me get my papers straight here. You had his approval rating at 42, disapproval at 57. What are your thoughts on what you found there?
Well, Clay, let me tell you. Okay, that's a negative 15, and that's not something you'd want from any politician. But his 57.42 minus 15 is better than the 38 approve, 61 disapprove he had back in the winter. So yeah, it is what it is. The high watermark for a Democratic presidential nominee in Maryland was 4 years ago when Joe Biden got 65% of the vote. I'd have to double check, but I'm pretty confident. Even Lyndon Johnson in 64 didn't get the same percentage that Biden got 4 years ago. So I guess the goal is, while Maryland is not really terribly, fascinating to study as it relates to what's going to happen nationally, it's still interesting to see. And I see, as I said, I see some signs, most particularly when asked if the election were today, would you vote for the Democratic ticket or the Republican ticket? And among independents in Maryland, who comprise 20% of the vote, Vice President Harris is leading, but only by 2 points, 38-36. That is not something, if I were with the campaign, I would be pleased about.
One thing that was striking to me looking over the polling data, when you look at the direction of the country, whether we're going in the right direction or the wrong direction, you have statewide the right direction at 50%, wrong direction at 45%. That mirrors almost exactly what President Joe Biden's approval numbers are, aren't they?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And when you look, but real quick, the state got a little bounce out of the convention too, because in February, the right track wrong number was like 41% right track, 50% wrong, 41% right direction in February, 50% wrong direction. So there's been a little boost there. But what's fascinating that you mentioned Biden's approval kind of mirroring the direction of the country. What's even more fascinating to my eye is when I crossed the presidential election by direction of country, the Harris-Walz ticket is receiving 93% of voters who say the country is moving in the right direction, and Donald Trump, J.D. Vance are receiving 70% of the vote of those that say it's in the wrong direction. And that's why the polls and pundits spend so much time talking about that right direction, wrong track question, because as you see, it is a very good indicator of where the vote is kind of going. And again, not to put a too fine a point on it, I haven't seen the number recently, but the national right direction, wrong track number is going to be critical in this upcoming election.
Can you extrapolate from any of this data and ascribe to either party enthusiasm for the candidate? The Trump Vance ticket and the Harris-Walz ticket?
What I would extrapolate from this poll is that definitely enthusiasm, excitement, euphoria within the Democratic base was accomplished from the actions of the last 6-7 weeks. Absolutely. And that's why Kamala Harris's approval rating went from 46 approved, 47 disapproved to 55 approved, 37% disapproved. That's much better. But still, a 55-37 number, that's going to make it very difficult for her to approach Biden's sort of benchmark of 65% 4 years ago. What does that suggest for the rest of the country? We're just going to have to keep an eye and see how the next couple of weeks evolve. We got the debate coming up on the 10th. They are still doing the debate, aren't they, Clay?
Yeah. I heard the 10th. That was a definite. I don't know if there's any more than that.
Well, I heard from one friend that the other day that Trump's chickening out, and then I heard from another that Harris is chickening out. So I get conflicting news from my source of friends. But so we'll see. And then we've talked about this before. I still believe that at the end of the day, on paper right now, it still looks like this is going to be a close election. I still say in about a month, a critical mass is going to form, and it's going to form one way or the other. Nope, can't do with Donald Trump anymore. I'm done. Or nope, I can't do with these incompetent Democrats anymore. I'm done. And we'll see how it shakes out.
Now, you were the grand poobah of all Maryland polling, and I'm going to put you on the spot for a second, Patrick.
Yeah, baby, I love being put on the spot.
If you were to give any kind of advice to the Trump ticket or the Harris ticket, what would it be? Given these numbers, what advice would you give them on how to do better in the state of Maryland?
Clay, my advice would be the exact same to either one. And that would be, if you want to do well in Maryland and across this country, you hire Patrick Gonzales, pay him, there's 2 months, pay him $1 million a month for the next 2 months. And I guarantee you something good will happen. Not necessarily for you, but for me.
For you, right.
That is the advice. That is the advice I would give them, Clay. God's honest truth.
Hey, it's always well to think good of oneself. You know what I'm saying, Patrick?
Oh, yeah, baby. I know exactly what you're saying.
We're going to come back in a little bit and have part 2 of this because there was a release today. In our next video, we will speak about Governor Wes Moore's job approval and a couple of other issues. That'll be on our next show. We'll hear shortly. So don't say goodbye yet, Patrick. We'll say goodbye, Patrick, in the next video. Is that okay with you, Patrick?
You better believe it.
I'll talk to you soon.
We'll see you all again real soon.
Bye.